Hello and welcome back to our second talk of the Deep Dive Days. My name is Umar.
I'm Nora.
And we're super excited to have you back.
Just quick info again to the Slack channel. I hope you found the last one. You can find it in the general channel again if you scroll a bit up where Toby posted it a few days ago, and otherwise just search for it. I'm sure you'll be able to find it.
Yeah, so it was a great talk by Ashley, but I'm super excited now about the second talk with Andrew Mayne. So just let me tell you a bit about Andrew Mayne. Andrew Mayne is a Wall Street Journal best-selling novelist, creator, inventor, and a magician. That's pretty diverse. He's considered one of the most prolific magicians of the last decade, with a publication of over 50 books and videos for the magic fraternity. He was listed by Amazon as one of the top 10 best-selling indie authors of the year. Now that's already pretty impressive, but let's get to it. He was also a creative consultant behind renowned names of David Copperfield, David Blaine, and Penn and Teller. Now, if this sounds like somehow boring or like a desk job for you, which God knows I can't even imagine, let me tell you this one. Andrew Mayne swam with with multiple great white sharks. In the Discovery Channel's week Great White Shark special, Andrew Mayne, Ghost Diver, great name by the way, he used a stealth suit he created himself to interact with the sharks. Now, if you're still somehow not like biting your nails and sitting at the edge of your seat, because again, God knows, I can't even know why, well, maybe you're just an AI head, which is completely fine. So let me tell you this one fact. He developed an AI models to create augmented reality simulators to prepare himself with that shark swim. So using these AI models, he actually trained and learned how to interact with the great white sharks. And currently, Andrew Mayne is bringing his AI, creative, and storytelling expertise all together as part of the creative applications of OpenAI. I know I say this a lot, but this one, I really do mean it. I'm super excited about this one, guys. Andrew Mayne, how's it going?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be part of this. Ashley, she sent me a little Slack message saying this has been a wonderful hackathon so far. So I hope that holds true.
Yeah, will do.
Definitely warms my heart, and definitely hope to live up to your expectations.
So, from those who just heard my background, my bio of somebody who, that's somebody who can't figure out what they want to do when they grow up. I love to do interesting and different things. And I've been involved in artificial intelligence, had an interest in it my whole life. And when the opportunity came up, particularly GPT-3, it was exciting because I have a little bit of a technical background and kind of an understanding, but I spend a lot of time in the world of language and words and how we communicate. And GPT-3 being such a sophisticated model was very fascinating to play with. And I actually started first as a developer working with GPT-3 and then came up with some fun applications for it. And then I got asked to work with OpenAI, and which is why I'm here today. And I'm very thrilled to be here because GPT-3 is so exciting because it allows people to make use of the most advanced large-scale kind of model there is and do really cool applications. It's like having access to a tremendous amount of energy and to be able to build different things with it. And so what I want to show is some of the different capabilities that we can do with GPT-3, give just a little bit of a background. I know most people here are pretty aware, but still give kind of an overview and a framework to look at it, show you different things you can do with it, and help people sort of figure out how to navigate our documentation and some of our examples. And we'll handle questions. And if I gloss over something that either of you want me to explain, please don't hesitate to ask me in the middle to say, hey, can you go back over this?
Okay.
So
sounds good.
Let's begin. I have a little bit of a, we'll go pop over to my slideshow here. And what we're going to do is just we're going to do a few slides, then we're just going to go into the playground and start making things, okay?
That
sounds good.
Like it.
This is
very proactive. Very good.
So working with GPT-3, one of the things to keep in mind is that as we work with language and what we try to figure out how to make this do interesting things, GPT-3 was never really trained to do any one thing. The things that it's capable of doing are things that it sort of like happened because as it trained on such large models, as it trained on so much data, it was able to sort of figure out how to do a lot of cool things. And that's sort of what's surprising. It's not like we programmed any specific thing into it. It figured out how to do it. So that's my background. We already got over that. The way to think about ML, I think this is something we're already familiar with. You think of them as prediction machines, and GPT-3 is a prediction machine. We give it some text, and it tries to predict what will come next. And this can be either what it knows about the world. If you ask it, is an apple a fruit? It might say yes. But also it's learned how to construct sentences. It's learned how to be able to answer complex questions and how to do things like do code. So it's not just knowledge, but it's sort of understanding. A prompt is the text we send. So if you want to get GPT to do something, you just give it text. Text in, text out. That's the way we think of it. Now, text can be a lot of different things. One of the first things I played around with was like having it simulate conversations, and GPT-3 started using emoji without me even asking it to. And I'm like, wow, it knows emoji. And you may have seen an example where we asked GPT-3 to tell a movie plot using just emoji. And that came about just because one day I saw, oh, wow, it does emoji. What else can it do with that? But you can also do things like code. You can do things like, I'll show you some database stuff. There's a lot of other things you can do with it with just text. As I said before, it wasn't programmed to do things. It can be a chatbot. It can classify stuff. It can summarize. There was no layer that went in there to program. These were things it taught itself or learned in sort of the process in which GPT-3 was made. You know, we partnered with Microsoft. We built the 5th largest supercomputer on the planet and created this 175 billion parameter model. And doing that, these things were basically emergent. It learned how to do these things by observation. When we get into actually playing around with stuff, we're just going to give you kind of a quick idea of temperature. When you do settings, we have low and we have high. And GPT-3, you can sort of affect the randomness. If you set it low, it's going to go say the first thing, and it's going to be pretty much every time you ask it that. If you set higher, it's going to be kind of a wider range. So we'll get into that when I show you the playground. And if you're thinking about applications right now, though, low is good for classification. Medium is good for, it could be the right answer, but give you a different way to do it. High will give you a wide range of possibilities, which a lot of creative applications, people who want to do creative content will often use a higher setting. But if you're trying to build a classifier, what is this, what is that, then lower tends to be better. And again, this will sort of start to gel once we play around with it. So the secret to writing a prompt is really paying attention to how GPT-3 sees the world. What is it? And its world is the world of text. It's read web pages, it's read forums, it's read Wikipedia, it's consumed so much textual information. And so if you think about how it may have encountered something in the real world of text rather, then that gives you an idea of how to create a prompt to get it to do something. And wrong answer doesn't necessarily equal the wrong question. So if you try to get it to do something, pay attention to the output, because GPT-3, if it keeps giving you the same response or the same kind of response, it's looking at what you're asking it or sending it in a different way than maybe you think. And sometimes you can just deconstruct a prompt by going back and saying, how else could this be interpreted? So what's the perfect prompt? What's the perfect way to ask GPT-3 to do something? I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out. And the cool thing is that we're discovering capabilities all the time. And I'll show you in the documentation some of the different examples and things like this that we've come up with. And these just come around with playing around with it and seeing what can happen. So prompt design is ongoing. The more we learn about models like GPT-3, how they make predictions, the better prompt design is. There's no one right way. You'll find ways to improve stuff. And we can learn a lot from unexpected results. And playing and experimenting is really the best way to go about it. So let's start here. Does this pop over to the documentation window for you? Oh, there we go. Perfect. So this is the documentation. I highly recommend people check it out. And I know documentation is often kind of, oh, boring. Do I really want to read that? But there's a lot of useful information in there. And I've seen people write or say, hey, I just found out this thing that it could do this or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's in the documentation. And if you take a look at that, you'd find out you could do even more with that. And there's a lot of kind of cool things hidden inside of the hidden, but just sort of in the documentation there. And we break down like how to do prompts, how to troubleshoot, how to do classifications. And then we get into things like how to do advanced stuff. Like we know that if you give GPT-3 like an example of a tweet and you tell it to give you the sentiment, it can follow that pattern and do that. But you can teach it a pattern like that, then teach it a new pattern of say, okay, here's just a list of tweets. Now just give me a list of sentiment. So you show it what it's supposed to do there, and then you change the way you want it to do there, which means that instead of trying to do one at a time, you can now give it a list of like 15 or 20 examples that you need classified or to process, which makes it much more efficient to use this way. And this is one of the examples I tell people, it's in the docs, because people are like, how do I make it more efficient? And it's like, well, check these things out. So you can click through here and check these things out. I'll do the presentation, and then we'll get into also, we have these endpoints here too, which are sort of new features, which make it easier to do sort of compound stuff. Also, what we have is an example library. This is really new, which allows you to sort of find different examples to play around with, like, a simple classification example, how to do classification. It gives you the code for Python, the curl request. We've got a bunch of different examples. You can see like mood to color. And these came around, a lot of it was just like playing around with like, what are some fun examples? What are some cool things that we can do? And just we can keep adding to that list if you play with it. This is one of my favorites. It'll creep you out. This is the micro horror story creator. I won't do this here because, I don't want to terrify anybody, but that has like come up with some really spooky stuff. So these are some of the examples we have here. We have resources. There's some other links to there. I'm going to show you some stuff here. I have a site called GPT Tools, which I made to sort of show how to do semantic search, etc. So the documentation is worth checking out. We're always adding stuff to it and improving upon it. And you'll get your examples of like how to basically implement it, etc. All right. Let's go jump into the playground right now, and let's do a basic demo. Let's just see what we can do here. When we talk about it being a prediction machine, if we say it's going to predict something, it means it's going to try to figure out what should come next. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to set my temperature low, and top P is another sort of way to affect the randomness. It's based on something called Nucleus Sampling, which will basically take a larger group of tokens to evaluate. And I think everybody hears what tokens are. Tokens are sort of the way an ML model will take language or words and break it down into numbers, because it's all numbers at one level, whether it's an image or it's text or whatever, and it's making those kinds of predictions. Here we can choose the engine. We have several different engines here. We have DaVinci, we have Curie, Babbage, and Ada. Ada is the fastest and the smallest. DaVinci is the most powerful. And generally, I play with DaVinci first and then work my way through the other models to see if I can use a smaller model because they're more efficient. There's also you'll see it's called Instruct. Instruct is basically, we took GPT-3 and we showed it an example of people wanting to do a lot of things with prompts and said, okay, could we make it easier for somebody to get this thing done? And saying, instead of having to provide a number of examples, make it where it sort of understands if you want a list or if you want it to summarize, it does that. But I'm just going to focus on the straight up pure DaVinci and those engines right now. I'm setting my temperature and all this down to 0 because I'm going to show you when it's not going to be too random with what it's doing. And if I take some text, and let's talk about prediction, if I put in the text of a long time ago and click submit, we get, in a galaxy far, far away, a young man named Luke Skywalker was thrust into struggle for the Rebel Alliance. Okay. Notice how it keeps running out until it runs out. It stops there. That's because I have a response length of like 64 tokens. I can instead say just stop when you get to the first period, and I'll do that there. And let's go see this again. What happens if we press this button again? We get the same response. This time it stopped where I wanted. Let's try this again. We'll do this button, which just keeps going. The same exact text. Now, even if you set it to 0, sometimes you see some slight variations, which is just, when you use a very large computer to process stuff, some random fluctuation. But when you set to 0, you're going to get the same response like every time, pretty much. But if we go set our temperature really high, if I put my temperature up to, let's say, 9.9, and I click this again, let me bring my top P there. Let's go to this. If we click this, now it's something different. A long time ago in an office far, far away, a World Cup pool was born. Let's click the button again. I was born not knowing anything. Now we get the start of what looks like a book. And then we get a little bit of a Star Wars start. And so you see, when we set that temperature higher, it's choosing from a wider range of tokens to use to create its completion. And so it's kind of like a probability. If you wanted to have a limited number to consider or large, then you adjust your temperature or your top P. So it's just a little bit of demonstration on how like completion works. But we can do things like, I don't just have to do text. If I said, if I just gave it the text, and I'm going to put the temperature, let's put it around like, let's say 0.3. I like to work around 0.3 in that area for a lot of things. If I go too high, it'll sometimes get a little bit too weird on me, but sometimes people like weird. So if I just say, okay, complete this, it starts writing a sentence. Major discoveries in astronomy and physics have been made by use of the telescope. If I get rid of that period, I can just let it continue and I can get, all these examples. But let's just change one little thing. I'm going to say major discoveries in astronomy, and I'm going to add number 1 with a period behind it. Same text there, but now we're taking the form of a list. And now all of a sudden it decides, oh, this must be a list. We're making a list of things. And that's the cool thing about GPT-3. Now notice it keeps giving us the same response about discoveries of different planets. If we set that temperature higher, now we get a different list. So one little change of our text, all of a sudden GPT-3 says, oh, this is what we're doing. And when you're trying to create a prompt to get it to perform a task, think very clearly about what is the minimal amount of information you need to tell it what it to do, and also to show it how to do it. Now I could say, if I wrote, let's say, a list of major discoveries in astronomy, it might give us a list right there. Or it won't. In this case, it decides it's going to be kind of a Wikipedia article. Let's try this again. And again, it's not going to give us a list because it's saying this feels like a title, for a paragraph. But if we just go add that 1 period, there you go. So just a way to start thinking about prompts, how you can start to get it to do different things. My favorite example, though, of GPT-3 and what it's capable of, it's its ability to summarize. It's one thing to say, hey, complete some text, take this text, finish what I'm trying to say here, or give me an answer. And I'll show you more examples of that, by the way. The other thing is that it can read text and then understand it at a level unlike any other model that we have seen before. And this is very useful. So if we were to say, okay, if I were to take the first 3 paragraphs about Jupiter from Wikipedia, and I wanted to explain this, but I wanted to simplify this. You've seen other models that do this where maybe they go look for key phrases and use those to sort of write a TLDR. And some might be able to do a little bit of a summarization it's even better than that. GPT-3 can not only summarize something, it can adjust it for an audience. And what I mean by that is if I frame this and I say, okay, I'm going to tell GPT-3, my 2nd grader asked me what this passage means, okay? And I give it this passage. Let me just get rid of that space up there. And I put the text from Wikipedia there, and then I put this down here, and I say I rephrased it for him in plain language a 2nd grader can understand. We're going to tell GPT-3, hey, pay attention to this. Now I need you to rephrase it in plain language a 2nd grader can understand. And so we'll see if these settings work here. We might have to adjust them a little bit, but we'll see what it's able to do. Okay, here we got a pretty literal interpretation of what was up there, and that's because my setting was pretty low. But if I bring my temperature setting higher and we ask it again, and we get an explanation for a kid. So if we just pay attention to there, Jupiter is a ball of gas that is really big because closer to the sun than Earth is. Now, clearly, that's not correct. Why is that incorrect? And it's because our temperature is too high. And so you want to find that right setting to say, okay, where is that happy medium where it's performing the task I want it to, but it's also, giving me accurate text, okay? And you can see there it's giving us, here it's, giving us sort of a literal interpretation, but we try it again. And there we go. Okay, Jupiter is the 5th planet. So it's really big and really bright, really far away. Okay, and it takes sunlight 5 minutes to get there. So there you got an explanation for a kid using that Wikipedia text. So it was able to take that and break that down. But there are other ways you can use GPT-3 to do this too. Like we can take this text and I can just write the words TLDR, and go ahead and put a period there so it doesn't keep going. And we got a very simple summary of that. So you can sometimes find these magic phrases that make it very easy to get GPT-3 to do things, like just say, hey, TLDR, and this isn't going to adjust it for a child like the other examples did, but what this will do is it will give you that 1-sentence summation of what this is. And we can do things like another simple one is if we put tags, we'll get rid of that. decided to give us one tag. And then there we go. If we click that again, we got a bunch of different tags. So you can find these little simple things. A prompt could be just a few words, and all of a sudden you're able to give it text and extract things like tags or a summary, etc. When we talk about GPT-3 being able to do things with text, though, the cool thing is there are a lot of different ways in which we use text. Spreadsheets, for example. So if we take an example here, which is a request where first I say, I want a spreadsheet of top movies in the year of release. And we'll see if this prompt works with these settings right now. And if I just put title and year separated with a pipe and I click submit, it's decided to keep doing this. So if we go back up there, let's bring our temperature down. Again, for every application, you want to find the right temperature to do it. And once you figure it out, then it should work at that level. Because it's capable of doing so many different things, like I said, for classification, you need to find the right low setting. For creative, you need to find the right high setting. And once you nail it down, it's not too hard to figure out what's going to work consistently. So now all of a sudden, it's starting to give us a list of movies and year of release and the box office and how much it made, which is cool because I could take this data right here. I could copy this and put this in a text file and import it as pipe separated, as basically as a CSV. It's able to output a spreadsheet data just like that by giving it a simple example of showing it what format to do. And you could use, let's try another one, science fiction movies. And there we go, science fiction movies, directors, and year of release. And so notice that all of a sudden it gave us the same one over and over again. And that's because our temperature is low. But if we go back and we set that higher, and we get some crazy sort of text there. Another way you can get it to do exactly what you want is you can do priming. So if we say, okay, I need to show it how to do this, I will put Star Wars, and I'll put 1977, and then put George Lucas. And now all of a sudden it's following that pattern and giving me all of his movies in spreadsheet format. So kind of a cool way to work with that and to get different kinds of data. One of the amazing things about GPT-3 is that you can talk to it, or you can get it to kind of carry on a conversation, and you can have a back and forth. You can use it for a simple Q&A. If we just do something simple like question, who was the first person to go to space? It was Yuri's night the other night. So let's see if it does this. I'll set it lower, see what it says. For stop sequence, I'm going to use a return, so it stops there. And there you go. So it's able to answer that just by creating question and answer. You could do a Q&A. But if you want to do something more conversational, we could build something like a music bot. And I could say, just let's talk about music. And I could start off by giving it examples of what to ask. I could say that my user input would be here, like who wrote Staying Alive? And then the music bot would give me an answer. And I could show it several examples of how I wanted to answer a question. This is where it learns the pattern. GPT-3 is really good at picking up patterns. I have an example in the examples that is a sarcastic answer bot that gives you the right answer, but he's sarcastic. Which is to show you can build a thing that can have humor and can do other things, but also can stay on topic. To try to keep the music bot, this thing on focus, I come up with using this sort of middle layer. And what this does is I show GPT-3, like, here's a question. Is this a music question? And I ask it this. So I want it to, if I was building an application and it was maybe like to help students with math homework, I don't want it to start carrying on conversations about Minecraft. I want it to be able to stay focused, to not have the student use it for something other than that. And so you can add a middle layer in a conversation to tell the model, hey, this is within domain of what we're talking on, or this is not. And you can use that too if you're building an app that could say, wait, no, this doesn't qualify for that. So let's not answer this, or let's ask the user to be more specific. So I'm going to put the triple hashtag there as my stop sequence. Now, you'll see this come up a lot. It's not anything specifically programmed into GPT-3, but in journalism and copy editing, that the three hash marks are used a lot to separate copy. And that seemed to be just a natural way that GPT-3 sort of understood the separation of different content. So if I put in here, give it, let's say, a little bit higher setting, who composed the music for Avatar? We'll see if it answers that question first. And it says, is this a music question? Yes, James Horner composed the music for Avatar. Well, let's try a different question. How do I fix my pogo stick? And we'll see if it's able to, one, to figure if it's music or not, and then what it does next. And you can see there, I let it keep going beyond where it needed to, but right there, is this music questions? Like, no, I can only answer questions about music. So by putting that layer in there and giving it examples of telling it when to say no, and I would probably add a few more examples of yes, no to make this more specific as a question and answer bot. This is a way in which you keep it on focused. You can keep it to answer only questions. If you want to talk about JavaScript and not Python, then you could have it do that. So it's just one of the ways in which you can do that. And the thing about language models, as you know, is language models, having been trained on large amounts of language and human conversations, can sometimes say things that we don't want them to say. Sometimes they can take conversations in directions you don't want them to go, or they can be used in ways that we don't want to. And part of the thing that we encourage people to do is find creative ways to make these things stay focused and do what you need them to do. And this is one little technique for that. And working with language models means trying to understand, how do I take this really powerful model and get it to focus specifically on one thing? So let's show you another example. Is it understands a lot of things right off the bat. So if I say translate, translate I do not speak French into French. Let's see what it says there. And let me just put another stop sequence so it won't keep going. I presume that's good. My French, not so good. So, but you can see just like that, we can get it to say something. So let's see what it says if I ask it to say that in German. You can tell me if this is correct or not. So looks like German to me. You can find that it's already got a number of languages it understands, and it's able to translate back and forth. And you can teach it how to speak in the proper form too, because that's one of the things. A lot of languages have different forms. So if you give it different examples and say, this is the form I want you to do, then it will do that. And so it's pretty good with English, pretty good with French, pretty good with German, and a number of other languages. And some people have been exploring what that is. And these weren't things that we specifically said, hey, go do this. It's just in the data of the accumulated, there was a lot of foreign language stuff in there. And you'll see that it knows phrases in Thai and other languages like that, which is cool. It knows characters, like, different kind of characters besides just the, ones that we're used to in our English alphabet. So it's kind of fun to see what it can do. Now, I want to show you how you can use GPT-3 to sort of do a thing like take the idea of summarization or its ability to understand content. A lot of people focus on the generative side, but its ability to comprehend stuff is pretty cool. Imagine you were a company, you were a game developer company, you had an app, and people had a box where they could send you their response, and your application became hugely successful. And overnight, you had thousands of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people using it and sending you data and feedback, and you're a small team. How do you make sense of all this? Trying to process and read through all this is very complicated, takes time. You can use a system like GPT-3 to make it a lot easier. And so if you had, it's easy for a person to read something like this about somebody describing, I bought your game, this is what I liked, this is what I didn't like. But to try to process thousands of those a day becomes very, very challenging. What you want to know, though, is like, did the person like it? What game are they talking about? What can we improve? You want to sort of quantify and classify that data in a way that you could perhaps put it into a spreadsheet or just graph it and make it easier to track. So you can create a prompt designed to handle something like that. So if we do a prompt where we tell GPT-3, read this customer response, then answer the following question. Now let's just speak for a moment about why we put this phrasing here. It's not like we're really invoking a genie and asking for it to grant us a wish. We're doing this because as GPT-3 understands language, it understands what a request means and what it's supposed to do. It's very, very clear what role it's supposed to do here. Much like if it read a bunch of tests and saw them online and how to do this, or somebody asking, a favor or whatever in a forum, that's sort of how it learned. And so if you want to get it to do a task, think of how it might have encountered that in the world of text. So we tell GPT-3, read this customer response, then answer the following questions. So we have that same text before, and then we have questions. What was this what product was this about? Did the customer have complaints, et cetera? So we have 5 different things that we want them to answer that we can then put into, some tabular data. So I don't know, so keep my temperature here. Let me get rid of that stop sequence, and let's see what happens. And so we get a response now that breaks it down into 5 easy to follow things that make it very easy for us to see what this was about. And so if I need to scan through a bunch of customer feedback, I can use a prompt like this to do that. And you could use it for a lot of other things. You could use this for, if you're using, data about products, like product listings and things like this, and you need to figure out like what kind of product is this? Is boots, or is this outdoor wear, or fancy, or whatever. You could process data like that very quickly by creating a prompt that breaks it down into specific questions that you could then take that data and say, okay, put this into a spreadsheet here, et cetera. Now, if I wanted it to be more specific, if I just wanted to put just the name, I could just break an example down like this, and then, just do the simple thing like, what it is. You like just say, oh, it's too easy, et cetera, and show GPT-3 go take another example and then basically like paste below it another example like this with a different customer input, and it would learn to give the briefer answers. It would learn how to do shorter responses from that by doing that. So just some of the things you can do here. And if you go back to our examples, you'll see a lot of different things. And this is not the definitive list of these. Some of these are just things I just stayed up one night like, I wonder what else I could do. Oh, what about an analogy maker? And somebody else that, OpenAI has like, oh, I've got an idea for this. And they play with it, like, cool. Then we put it in there. So these were just sort of like seated around going, I wonder what you could do. This was just, I was like, I wonder if you could do mood to color. And then I typed in mood to color and it worked well enough. And there's a much better version of this to be made. So just a lot of different things that can be done. The language stuff, people played around with that, figuring that out, etc. So play with those examples and see what's possible. And there's so much more that can be done. I want to show you semantic search, which is we have, besides the completion endpoint, and that's what the playground does here. This uses the completion endpoint. It's the same API that when you build your app in Python or whatever they use it, it goes to the same place. This is just a nice interface to make it easy to play around with it. We also have other endpoints, and semantic search is like one of my favorite things in the world. Semantic search takes the power of GPT-3 to understand something and lets you send it some text, a query, and then a list of documents, which is really just a list of different text to compare it to. And this allows you to find the best match. It gives a score for comparing it to each one. It doesn't compare them to each other. It compares just each one of the list to the first query. And then it comes back and tells you what, gives you a score, which you can use to do cool stuff, because GPT-3's ability to understand language, to understand things, beyond keywords, to understand intent, etc., is powerful. Now, the simplest example is, we'll use tweet sentiment, which is, the hello world of any kind of language model task. But if I tell it my day has been, I use the emoji for thumbs up, and I give it a list of different responses, and I'm using this to separate it. Now, this is just the front end. The client side here, all it's going to do is just split this on these and create an array of positive, these different responses. It's going to send this to the semantic search model and say, here's the query, here's each possible response. Give a score for each one for how closely it relates to that. Okay, that's all that's happening. There is no code going beyond just splitting this into an array and sending it to the model. Semantic search has its own sort of specialized prompt it uses internally, but I, as a developer, all I have to do is send it a query and 3 things, and it'll give me a score, and then I can take that score and rank them to figure out what's the best fit. So if I click analyze, I get this tweet is positive. Pretty simple. And if I go, my day has been ugh, I'm curious to know what ugh comes back as, but my day is, this tweet is negative. And so you can see that it's, rated a negative, and you can see the scores here. And the scores by themselves may not mean as much as they do comparing it to the other responses and say this is a better fit. Okay, that's kind of cool. But we could do, let's say, industry category. Okay, I could give it a list of different industries and a company. And if I say, okay, what is Uber? and it says, oh, Uber, the #1 hit, the highest score is going to be transportation. Which is pretty accurate. If I take FedEx, the shipping company, and I put that in there, it comes back with logistics. Well, that's not the best answer, but it's the best from that list. But all I have to do is add shipping to that list, and it's going to compare all of them, and it'll come back and say, you know what? That's a better response, shipping. So you can use it to do really cool classification tasks, but not just simple ones. Let's take something like 7 basic plots. These are plots like, every movie, every book basically uses one of these plots: rags to riches, the quest, a tragedy, etc. So we're going to give it these plots, and I'm going to type in Jaws. Now, I know that it knows what the movie Jaws is and the book Jaws is about. I don't even have to explain the plot to it. I'm just going to tell it that. Now, if it was something that I created and never heard of before, then I would put that description into this box to try to tell it like, hey, this is what Jaws is about, etc. Okay, so I'm just going to type in Jaws and give it the list here and see which ones it thinks it fits. Overcoming the Monster. Okay, that had the highest score out of all of them. But notice the next one, Voyage and Return. If you've seen the movie or read the book, part of it is about the orca, the boat they're on that goes out to hunt the giant shark. So it's also a quest, a little bit of tragedy, and it's actually pretty good. Like the scores kind of rank with how well you might classify that. So GPT-3 was able to understand what that movie is about, what that story is about, and compare it to a list there. If I give it something like The Hobbit, which is another book and a movie, the quest, it comes up with quest is #1, and then it says overcoming the monster, etc. So that's, to me, just a really neat way to see how powerful this model is, because it's able to understand these sort of the concepts of these plots and to be able to figure out and to match them to other plots. You can do really cool stuff in the playground, creating like compare and contrast. You can do things like, how would you compare the work of Stanley Kubrick with Christopher Nolan? And it'll give you an essay. It'll write a little essay comparing the two of them, which is like original content. You could compare it to something that never saw, something that nobody ever bothered to compare it before, and create kind of a new comparison or analysis, which is one of the lesser explored areas of GPT-3. A lot of people like the sort of, hey, it's an oracle and answers my questions. But when you start saying, tell me about this and what those two things have in common, then you get the really cool kind of thinking computational part. Now, if you want to use semantic search, sometimes you're going to come across situations where you have a list of finite answers and the answer you want isn't there. But we ask, who's the director of Wayne's World? Well, the answer to that is going to be Penelope Spheris, who is right here. But if I say who's the director of Casino, which is Martin Scorsese, Scorsese's not on this list. And if you're trying to use semantic search for a finite list and the answer is not there, could be a problem unless there's a solution. But if we just ask it right now, it says, well, the highest score is Ridley Scott, but he's not the response. He's not the right answer. We could use a thing I call kind of like a generic match or generic, which is if I just type in the director, if I say the director, okay, and I put in the director of Casino, et cetera, all these other people, and then I click analyze, it'll say, no, the director's the best match, because none of these other people are a good fit. So you can put a generic match, which could either model, something in there or whatever, but that tells you how to sort of separate stuff. And you can use that actually for certain things too, like you can actually use it for situations where you want to separate text within one section or another. But that's another way you can play with semantic search to get it to do really cool things. So that's a semantic search. I want to now show you something we've added really recently. And these are these other endpoints. We have these other endpoints. And what an endpoint does, either it's like completion or it's a way to perform a task to make it simpler to do. Let's say you want to build a classifier, right? But you don't want to have to go write a bunch of a prompt. You don't want to have to build a lot of, you just want to be able to send it some data, tell me what fits best, and have the API do that. So what you can do is you can take, let's say you can give it a bunch of labeled examples of comparisons of, let's say, like text, good film, but very glum, label positive, metadata, example.com, et cetera. So you can give it a list of data, and we use the JSON lines format. So you upload the data to there, And then you can use that to sort of basically have your examples that it uses, and then you can query it and you can hit it and say, okay, now give me a response and send it a new response each time. So we store that for you there, so you don't have to send it every time you want to go do that. So you can do that for text classifications. And so you just upload your data and then it's stored there, and you'll get a reference number for it. Oh, there we go, like the file number, which makes it easy for you then to find it. So the next time you want to use it, you send your request, you put in the file so it knows to reference that data you sent, and then you just put in query. A movie is very good, which model you want to use. There's a model used to search through to find the best thing that fits, and then this model used to generate the response, how many examples, etc. So I recommend after you played around with the playground, once you played around and figured out some things you want to do, and if you're like, okay, now I know I want to do this, I want to do kind of an efficient way, then you can do this because it's easier, because we can handle, holding on to the examples, etc., and doing that. So this is basically, this is the search endpoint, which is what I was showing you before. You can use it to go through and figure out, what's the best match there. We have the question answering, which basically you can give it a list of examples of text and metadata, et cetera, and you can go through there and figure out ways in which you can then just send a prompt to it, which puppy is happy, and then it'll figure out how to give you a response or answers based upon that. So just a quick overview of our endpoints. We're love to have a way for a user to sort of interact with them, which is something, future goal. But right now you can see ways to take the things you can do with the record completion prompt and basically use them with a more complex sort of application. So it's a way to sort of simplify something instead of having to build the rest of the code for that, if that's helpful at all. I know I ran through things pretty fast. I just wanted to cover a lot of stuff and then make room for questions. So I think we're at the point now, if we want to do questions, that would be great. And I'm happy to hop into the playground and try to do examples and, by demonstration if that's needed, or go back to any other thing that you want.
Wow, well, that was definitely a lot of input. That was a lot of capabilities that we've seen here, and I'm just need a second to kind of take it all in. First of all,
interesting though.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for sparing us the horror story. I definitely do have a soft stomach. It's all numbers on one level. That's definitely a quote that I'm gonna hang on my room. I'm from a technical background myself, and that's why I'm gonna actually ask you a question now. That me being from a technical background, I hate when I get this question. But so you've shown us a lot of capabilities that go on here. This example with the emoji, it actually showed us that GPT-3 can actually do a lot of things that it's not necessarily kind of designed to. Now, I find this extremely impressive, but to be honest, quite frightening as well. So I want to actually see your take on that one.
Well, the kind of the premise of deep learning is that you take enough data and you have a system or a method that tries to figure out these connections from data and understand things between it. You're going to get emergent things. Things are going to come out, and you use deep learning to try to teach a thing how to do something that you couldn't teach it, or take too much code to be able to do it. And I think that it's exciting, but it is a thing that what happens when things get larger and more sophisticated. It's going to be interesting to happen. And that was what was really surprising about GPT-3 was, if you played with GPT-2, GPT's cool and it can do neat stuff. The phase change from GPT-2 to GPT-3 was phenomenal. The fact that GPT-3 was something that OpenAI felt like this could be a product that we're going to help people implement because it was so capable. And we're asking ourselves all the time, what are the implications of this? What's the good of this? What's the bad of this? What are we mindful of? And that's our rollout. We said, okay, we can't be the people just sitting here deciding completely for everybody else. Should you have this or should you not? Let's bring in other people to help us play with this, to experiment with this. And that's why we've been doing this rollout. Some people want it to be a much faster rollout, but we're hey, we got to be cautious about this. We feel comfortable enough about what it's capable of doing, but we know that there are issues with, biases it's picked up. There's other issues there about people using it for things we don't want to do, and trying to figure out the best way to do that. So the implications are incredible.
Yeah.
But, we're trying to be, get input from everybody else. That's why we do things like hackathons, is we want people to think about how to use it and how to use it safely.
Yeah, very much agree.
Yeah, I
with
mean,
all
the
of that.
implications are great, but I think the potential is even greater, and it's kind of up to us to try to use it as best as we can.
We also have super many questions actually from this workshop from the participants, so I'm going to get started with some of them. How many priming examples should we give GPT-3? Can you over or underload it?
I start with 0. If you notice the number of examples I used were 0 shot, I tried to give it a number of, because it understands how to do a lot of things already. Like I didn't have to show it how to summarize. I just said TLDR, summarized. And to do the language, I didn't have to give it, it was able to translate, English into French without any examples. It's able to do 0 shot in a lot of stuff. So I say start with 0. There are chances are in the world of text it's consumed, it might already know how to do that. And I would say the biggest mistake that I've seen people make is they try to treat it like they're adding a head to an ML model. They treat it like, oh, I got to add another level. I've got to train this or do this. It's like no, it's the pre-trained means it's already trained. You might need to get it to format. And there are cases where you do need it, but if it's encountered something it's never seen before, a new language or something else, but work from 0. That's right, work from 0 examples and then see what you get.
Yeah, this actually also kind of relates to the next question, which is how does your workflow with GPT-3 and settings look like? Try and error, any definite do's and don'ts you can give us?
I start low. I always start with a very low temperature. And the mistake I think a lot of people do is they start with a really high temperature, because if you click that button enough times, you're going to get something that works. And you're like, aha, it worked. Like, well, it's kind of random, like that's, if you go lower, then you start to think more about your prompt, like how do I be specific? And then you don't want to be too, set everything for 0, because then it's too deterministic or it doesn't, do much. You want to give it the flexibility, but if you're very clear about what it's supposed to do, you can set your temperature really high and it'll still give it to you. But start with a low temperature. Start with DaVinci, but then don't be afraid to go use other models. And there are other things I didn't go into, like frequency penalty and presence penalty. That happens when it starts to repeat itself, and that's when you adjust that, because it'll start repeating. It'll pick up a pattern you don't want it to. But my advice is low temperature, creep it up slowly.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a sweet spot between using a tool to the optimum and using a tool in an over-engineered way. And starting low, I think, is the best advice to kind of like work around this little problem. Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're just like without any examples, the fact that it can actually like produce text kind of shows you not only the capability, but the amount of data that kind of got into training that thing.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating also how generally capable it then is to answer all sorts of things. It probably surprises even you, like if you put in things and then you're like, whoa, this works and everything just kind of works, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Next question is, so you just said that you were able to input data that is stored. How about sensitive data? Are you able to read our input? Are there possibilities to include sensible data safe?
Check with the documentation to find out what our current policies are on that. Because I know that part of what we need to do is we need to evaluate certain things to make sure that these things aren't being used for malicious purposes. And I don't know the current specific how we explain that policy, but I would definitely check with that so.
Okay. Next one is GPT-3 is only accepting JSON files as an input. What would you suggest if I have a long PDF, Word, or other formats?
Okay, that was just the endpoints. Regular GPT-3 itself just accepts text. That was for the endpoints, for the search endpoint, for the classification and the question answered endpoint. Regular GPT-3, you just send it text, just plain text. That's what it likes. If you have a PDF, convert it to text.
Very simple.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of students abusing it with a kind of like, I can just see a summarizer for like books and things like that, like a TLDR for like, I don't know, my Introduction to Fluid Dynamics books. Students are going to abuse that tool, definitely.
Yeah, and the thing too is, remember, there's a token limit. So GPT can accept up to 2,000 tokens, which is about 1,500 words. So if you're building a summarizer, just remember to break stuff down. And that's the thing I should have covered, was just that limit. But
yeah, because one question was also if there's an upper limit for prompt length to still be usable. So if you have a 100-page novel, that would not be possible to put in.
No, you'd have to break it down, and that's you'll see that it's able to do kind of shorter form narrative, but it doesn't do longer form and other things because it trained within that window. And so right now that window is 2048 tokens.
Okay. And is there any way to fine tune on the participants' data sets, or is inputting the data as prompt in the playground the only way to work with it?
Presently, we don't offer fine tuning. I will tell you this. 9 out of 10 times when people say they want to fine tune stuff, it can be solved in a prompt. And maybe their case might be different, but very often it's like, part of what I do at OpenAI is people will bring me I'm trying to do this, how to build a prompt to do this. And I see that people have over-engineered their prompt, overdone it, or just haven't thought it through. And you could do a lot more with prompts than people realize. Can't do everything. And I'll be the first person to say, no, it can't do this. But really think clearly about your prompt design. And I'll see things like people wanted to take, let's say, legal documents and like, oh, it's not working. And I look at their prompt. I'm like, you have a bad example in your prompt. I'm guilty of this. I'll write prompts that work like 80% of the time. I'm like, oh, it's almost, the GPT is kind of failing me, but almost good. I'm like, no, 2 out of 10 of my examples were wrong. It's like, it's doing what I taught it, but I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, over-engineering, you can't go around it. I mean, I'm guilty of that myself. I can't remember how many times I said, yeah, that just needs a couple more layers. Hey, that needs a couple more nodes. Hey, that needs a couple more data, but just ended up overfitting or doing whatever. And I can imagine the same thing with GPT-3.
Yeah,
the thing is really capable. If it's not working, maybe
it sounds
check
very
yourself.
straightforward to you, but then, when you look over it again, you're like, oh, wait a second.
I've had people bring me really large prompts. I'm like, what are you trying to do? Like this? I'm like, no, just phrase it like this. And it turns into and it's been weeks, and it turns just like one sentence. And they're like, they're happy and then they're angry.
Yeah, it probably just takes practice as well to figure out. Oh, no.
I know the feeling.
Okay, there's also another question about, with the amount of misinformation and wrong facts on the web, and GPT-3 not being an actual knowledge model to my understanding, has there been research from OpenAI about the accuracy and of the knowledge represented in GPT-3?
Yeah, I mean, we have teams that try to work entirely on the focus of like how to use models like this for factual information, et cetera. And the problem you're going to have on any language model is, even if you have a language model that is purely filled with factual data, if you froze that in time if you froze it in time a week ago, and then you asked it about like, how is the standard model holding up? It'd be like, pretty good. And then, it wouldn't know about the latest, development and like, we found out, some of those crazy muons. So any model is always going to have the problem that there's going to be a time frame. Like if you asked it, if you asked GPT-3 what COVID was, it wouldn't know because that model was created before that was. So you need to think about integrating these models with other sources of data. And so GPT-3 is really good. And like our question and answering, the way that works is, I can give it canonical data, I can give it a list of data, and then say, here's my question, find what you think matches, and now rephrase it or answer my question using your language ability, your ability to understand language. So I think that's really, you want to go for hybrid systems. Use language models to understand and explain, and then use other like trusted sources of data to be your trusted sources.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, great. I mean, the fact that it's pre-trained, again, it offers you a lot of capability, but normally, maybe it's going to do the case with its pre-training, but maybe sometimes you're going to have to build on top of it. Again, use some data that are reliable, just as Andrew said. That's the way it works.
Also very...
And I have a prompt. Yeah, I have a prompt in there too, and we've a couple people worked on this too at OpenAI, like how to see how confident it is on an answer, and you can actually get it to sort of kind of self-check itself, like, well, I think this is the answer, but maybe don't trust me on that one.
Definitely.
Nobody likes a snob, even if it's a language model. So for that reason, I think that's also a good capability and a good feature to have.
That's very true. What's the most exciting GPT-3 application you've seen so far?
The 2 things that struck me the most, one was when I watched it summarize and then adjust that for a child, and that's, in psychology, there's the concept theory of mind, which is understanding how somebody else sees the world. And GPT-3 it's one step among many steps to getting to, AGI. It is not AGI. It is a very interesting early development that we realized, wow, more capable than we thought. So I don't want to try to oversell and be like, this is it, everybody, solved. But when it did a summarization and then it wrote that at a level a kid can understand, I'm like, man, it's reading the text, it's understanding the text, it's rephrasing the text, and now it's adjusting it to a 9-year-old. That just blew me away, because just to think of everything that went into that. And then really semantic search, because like when I came on board, we had semantic search was available, and our developers, our people who created, done some kind of cool stuff, but it wasn't getting a lot of love from the developer community. And so that's why I built that demo. If you go to GPT-tools.com, you can just plug your key in there, and you can use that to play around with it. I built that because I'm like, this is like really, the ability of the model to understand things is powerful, and so much of the problems we deal with in life is making choices, this or that. But when you have an AI, you can say, here's a list, this is what I'm looking for, tell me what it is. That's just is exciting. I think that's one of the sort of the most powerful implications of a model like this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a bit of goosebumps right here. But yeah, for everybody who doesn't know, AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. And when you hear that, hey, we've made it, that's exactly the point where you start freaking out. But I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure we're pretty far away. GPT-3 is not the answer, but it definitely does get.
Yeah, I was
kind
also
of get it thinking.
Yeah, I was also super mind blown the first time I saw the translator thing with Jupyter. Like, that's just so crazy to see all the context it has to understand to then come up with such a simple description of something that's fascinating. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But also, what do you think is the dumbest application that still has gotten a lot of attention in GPT-3?
I don't want to pick on it. I will say this, like I'm a writer, okay? Like my background is a novelist. And I see a lot of people, and I think it can be, I've built little tools to help do like character stuff and fun things. I've got a book coming out that may or may not have some things from GPT-3
Another one.
in it. I'm not saying yes or no, but little pieces. But I see people spending a lot of time to like write novels with it, and I'm like, you're better off just writing the novel, because like it's GPT's capable, but like you're going to be a better writer than GPT-3 is when it comes to that. Maybe it'll come up with some more random stuff, which is helpful, but I see people spending a lot of time trying to solve a problem that just maybe comes through a little more hard work and discipline. And then somebody's going to go write a brilliant novel with it, and I'm going to look like an idiot. So,
Yeah, that's life, Andrew. That's life. You're always like completely proven wrong. But like in my opinion, I think that horror story generator thing is definitely the dumbest. Like,
You'll never go into that.
I have a soft spot, guys. Please don't use that on me. To be honest, I don't know who
Make a lot of memes of that, please.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
It can be creepy late at night. Go click on that, then all of a sudden you just start getting like
little truth out there with
like,
with GPT-3.
Andrew,
it's too good at.
Andrew, I've got to moderate the rest of the week. If I don't like show up tomorrow, it's your fault.
We know what happened.
Yeah.
Oh no. Another question is, how can we apply confidence score to the Q&A type after validating it with external data? Can GPT-3 do that?
Yes, so you can do can do it like a logic probabilities. You can take basically when it sends you back, and I dig into the documentation, but you can take the tokens that it comes back, and you can basically do a kind of a mathing on there to see how high it gives you. You can do like best of 3, and you can use a couple different ways in which to kind of create a score that does that. The challenge is that like, if you come from a really big engineering sort of background, that seems like it's a great response. But if you come from sort of the world of language, you go like, that might give me a false confidence though. It might say it's fitting this best, but the reason is that it has the same number of vowels. It could be some other reason that it really matches. And that's I think in GPT-3 because it sees patterns you don't like. I was doing a list before of like, I do a list like, list of superheroes. I do like Aquaman, Batman, Superman. And then it would do like, Hawkeye, The Flash, and da-da-da. And I told people like, look, it knows that they're all DC characters. And somebody else said, yes. And because you gave it 3 dudes, it's giving you a list of only male superheroes. And I didn't notice. And then I realized, oh, wow, it picked up that pattern too. So maybe I need to make that list a little more mixed up or whatever. And so that's things you realize. It will pick up on patterns you don't realize are there. So those confidence scores can be helpful, but it might say, yes, this is really good. this is 12 syllables too, and that's not what you're asking for.
Yeah, I guess there's also a bit of a danger if you don't notice yourself the pattern that you put into the data, and also when you see the results, you don't realize, and then once you implement that in a bigger field or make it important in some places, it might end up having some bad cause some problems somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
But I guess that's a problem with all deep learning and AI things, and not GPT-3 in particular.
Yeah, that's like a microcosm of sort of the issues of bias in large models and stuff. Is that there's and you can see that even the simpler patterns, and so you just want to be aware of that and have more eyes on it.
I mean, explainable AI is there exactly to fix that, like kind of a small issue to kind of see, okay, my model's deciding on that thing, but actually why? So, and like asking the why yourself or asking the explainable AI model why.
Just being a bit more careful yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, people are wondering what your opinion is on DeepMind's AlphaGo.
Oh, yo.
Oh, amazing. And then AlphaGo 0, I mean, that was my favorite thing was when AlphaGo came out. People were like, well, it trained it on a bunch of, Go games. And like, Go was the game that I was like, when the computers win that one, then maybe it's game over. And then AlphaGo came out, and then you had people some people were like, well, you trained on all these models, like force to learn, and then AlphaGo 0 comes out, and it taught itself how to play it. I'm like, yeah, like this is crazy, it's amazing. And what they've done, the protein folding, these things are. We're in a golden age, folks. This is amazing.
How do you think it compares to GPT-3?
They're different, and the idea that like, and I'm not qualified to answer this question, so let me make that clear before I answer this question. In that and you going from AlphaGo to AlphaGo 0 is that AlphaGo 0 was really a great example of how things can learn to do stuff. And we've done fun stuff. If you looked at what we've done with reinforcement learning, if you looked at what we've done with building like, the video games and playing people like that, that's a very interesting area. GPT-3 is really focused on sort of the deep learning of just give it this big data set and let it go through and sort of teach itself language. And they're both really helpful advances moving forward and figuring out different strategies and how to do stuff. So, both are, I think that what I love is like tomorrow somebody could pop out of the bushes with some new thing and be like, here, what I got. And we're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And so that's kind of the cool thing about AI right now. And so I'm excited by all of that. So
both very amazing in their own ways.
What I like about GPT-3, it's here and you can use it now.
Do something with it. Make use of it, everybody.
I mean, OpenAI and DeepMind, I don't know if you guys think of yourselves as competitors, but I'm just loving the competition there. Like, so watching AlphaGo, and then like OpenAI Gym for me was also like something that really flashed me when I first got to use it, get to know it. So yeah, definitely is an exciting time.
Well, the other thing about it too is that like to get really practical, useful AI that solves problems and helps advance humanity, no one group or person is going to have the whole. It's like the internet. Nobody has the whole answer to the internet and how you use this. And AI is infinitely going to be a bigger thing than this. So you need all these people trying to solve these things and figure out different ways to do it, because one approach, we have our where we think of the approaches to work here, but somebody else might say, no, we think we need to do this, or there might be utility for that. If you're in robotics, things like reinforcement learning are super helpful. So it's just the more people, and if there are people here participating in this that might have brilliant ideas about the future of AI,
definitely,
I encourage you, if you want to check out OpenAI, consider working with us. But the other thing is like don't feel like the problems are solved. One of the greatest things I thought was when you looked at generative adversarial networks. This was Ian Goodfellow was like 28 years old, just sitting there one day like, I wonder if I have I take a randomizer and I take a recognizer and I have them go back and forth. Not a super complex, sophisticated thing compared to other stuff, but the idea there was brilliant. And now you have this entire new area of AI that's amazing. Who knows how many other areas are out there like that? Who knows how many of the things that are one person here this weekend is going to be like, I wonder if I did this and this.
Yeah, some things are so simple and seem so obvious once you heard them or once you've seen them work, but to come up with them yourself is just,
there's like amazing potential, and there's lots up for grabs, and like the point of getting a lot of people to work together, all brilliant minds, like kind of collaborating on it is
Yeah.
it's just beautiful, in my opinion.
Yeah, even when I heard more just about in general deep learning, just like it's actually so much simpler than you think it is when you first heard of it, and then you actually know what it actually does, and you're like, Jesus, this is actually not
It's all
that
numbers on one
complicated,
level.
and
That's
it's
the beauty of
at
it.
its core. So that's always really
I'm
cool
a
to see.
magician and I'm in AI, you know, like because it takes
It's
a lot of
magic.
different people. Yeah, it takes a lot of different. A year ago, I was playing with sharks. Now this because it takes. You have really brilliant people who are building these things, but then you to be able to collaborate and work with other people who bring in different domains of expertise. And that's what I say. My advice to everybody here: get out of your own head. That's the best thing I can do. Is like share and talk to other people, and you'll never know what you come up with.
Do things that seem stupid at first, but might work. You never know.
Story of my life.
True, to be fair. I love it. Worked out well, though, so there you go. Is it possible to make GPT-3 learn to play games through rules and moves via input text?
Yes, if you can put it into language, you can get it to understand this is a pattern. If you do this, you do this. This means this. So yes, you can do that. It's maybe not terribly sophisticated, but absolutely could be capable of understanding because it understands basic logic. This does this means this. So if I go 3 steps and do this, there is a lot of potential there. Like you've seen like AI dungeons and wonderful stuff with like interactive AI, but if you took, let's say, semantic search, or if you did the idea of building a world with a bunch of different possibilities and have GPT-3 figure out which one happens next or other stuff, yeah, there's who knows what could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Nora, but I was the bad game player in my group of friends, and I was like the guy who's always losing,
Not good at gaming.
whatever we were playing, and if GPT-3 actually managed to beat me, then
Pretend like you're good. It's just GPT-3.
yeah, that's gonna hurt on another
Can give it a
level.
go. Maybe it'll work.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, like how you for this prompt, like how you actually put the prompts into the text. I think this is also one of the most important thing to kind of test around, guys. Like when you're trying to go around GPT-3, seeing how it goes. The most important thing is to actually know which prompts it kind of reacts to in the best way. And as Andrew said many times, just start simple, start low. It doesn't need that much over engineering, and just try to understand, okay, what's going on, what's the pattern it's actually trying to pick up on. And that's the way you go.
A little shortcut is do a search. Go search to see if let's say you want somebody wanted to do a game and say rules for such and such a game. Go find that, and you might find that's a method that's been used a lot, so much that GPT-3 may have encountered it and understood it, and then you just follow here's the rules for my game. And you find there might be these little shortcuts to get it to do a thing, because there could be some games forum with thousands of examples that it learned at some point. So if you tell it some rules, it'll go, oh, I get a format, I understand, and then now we can do this.
Great.
We also have another practical question. Could you explain again the difference between the settings temperature and top P, and how to use it in combination in the best way? Maybe give an example as well.
Okay. So the temperature is sort of they both affect the randomness. And temperature basically says I want you, here's a prompt, and I want you to pick one out of, for each token, we'll call a token a word, although it's not always a word. Let's say each token, if I set 0, just choose the first one that comes to mind. If I set it higher to say to 0.9, then it might say consider the next 90 or so that come, and just choose one of those and choose any one of those next, and that's fine. So temperature, think of temperature working like that. Top P, basically there's a paper you can read on it. It's based on Nucleus Sampling, and the idea is that take a look at the next few tokens, 4 or 5, average them, and I'm mutilating this paper, let me make that clear right now, average them, and then choose the one that best fits. And the example I give is let's say you were movie producers, and I came to pitch you a story. You are using temperature. And all right, Andrew, let's hear your idea for a movie. And I'm a tree that says one word, and a talking, oh, you already kicked me out of the office. You've already kicked me out of the office, okay? Because that sounds like a horrible idea. But and that would be temperature. If I use top P, I'm a tree that says one word and a talking raccoon based on the Marvel property Guardians of the Galaxy. You're oh, all of those together sounds really good. You lost me with the raccoon, but because we're using, top P and we're looking at the whole range, and I averaged those together, and Marvel kind of boosted it to be a little bit here, let's use that. So it's a way to sort of sometimes get a different kind of response, because it'll consider a few more tokens. It'll say, okay, let's consider this range here, and then decide what to do next. It is really hard to see the difference. It is really hard to see the difference when you create prompts. I assure you it's there, but you might go through hundreds of examples and not notice much. But it's one thing you can do. If you think it's getting close, just forget temperature, go to top P. You can adjust. We're like, don't use both, and it's like people take that as a challenge, like Ghostbusters, like don't cross the streams. But try it. Do what you like.
There's not one you should focus on more. It's just do whatever and see what works.
I stick to temperature a little bit, but more probably because it's the top one.
It's first one that springs to mind.
It's a stupid reason. It's a stupid reason.
Don't read too much into it, folks. Don't read too much into it.
You never know.
Not a but not an expert.
Yes, you are. Is GPT-3 performing well also multi-language use cases from your point of view, or would it be production ready at this point?
I would say that it's pretty good. The feedback I've gotten is that it's very good at like French and German and those languages, and understands other ones, and it depends what you want to do with those other languages. The best thing I would say, and it really depends on the application, like I can give it some more obscure languages and it can sometimes recognize them, but there might be better tools for that too. And that's the thing too, is like there's sometimes, like I tell people, like GPT is great, but you might be able to use a simpler model for this, like use it for the really cool stuff. But best thing is to play with it and see if it works with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, like the multi-language use cases, it's definitely an amazing point. And I mean, we've got the challenge from Bayerischen Rundfunk AI and Automation Lab, and it's actually like some of the challenges that they talked with us about is like, okay, it works good on English text. Would it work on German text? And I think this place here, the hackathons, and our hackathon especially, of course, guys, is one of the places to find out if it does work. And I'm just super excited to see if it works with Arabic. This is the moment I get to play with GPT-3. I'm just going to test, okay, let's see what good in Arabic it can, because Arabic can be a challenging language.
Do you actually know how many different languages the model has been fed? Or how much of different languages?
I don't. The answer that personally, no. I don't know if we really know, because we put so much text into it that it may have encountered, some obscure version of Icelandic at some point. That's the thing, is you sometimes find
old
things pop up like, it knows that. So
crazy. Yeah, makes sense.
And it's there's like a curve of things. Like English is really well, then you get French and German, and then there's sort of a drop off, and it's like a person that's kind of traveled the world but sort of only picked up a little bit here and a little there in some other places.
Yeah, like hello, how can I order coffee? Things like that. Like basically like me.
Yeah.
And
that's you think about one of the exciting things that's going to happen. Imagine when language models are able to, we start training them on other data and other languages and other cultures and other stuff, and that's going to be an exciting point. When what can it do now? What's it going to do when it even has, you get into a little bit of kind of linguistic, cognitive theory about what it has, and sort of different ways of looking at stuff. What happens then?
Yeah, very interesting. We'll see.
Yeah.
At some point. Also, what do you think about GPT-3's alternative, which they are currently training at Google with trillion of parameters?
I mean, there is I know the paper. I don't think it's really kind of a head-to-head sort of thing. That was basically kind of trying to proof of concept for sort of like the switch transformers, which is sort of a different way to sort of build a thing. It's not really kind of a head-to-head with GPT-3, but it was, I think, a really cool proof of concept and stuff. So it's, we're all going to benefit with people building bigger and more complex models. Like I said, it's not like GPT-3, everybody stop, AI solved, it's done, we got this. No, it's not going to happen. And so you're going to have people and we have our brilliant researchers who made this have their approach, but there are really smart people elsewhere going, what if we did it this way? And
Yeah, I mean, a healthy competition, I think, is like the root of many innovative things that we've achieved in the modern age. Just think, like me being like a bit of a petrolhead, just gonna be like guilty of charge, and like seeing the competition between the big car makers in the golden age of automobile. Now, of course, we see like the competition in the electrical car, like electric vehicles. That's also, I mean, competition is good as long as it's healthy, as long as it just drives innovation.
The way I see it, though, it's like, to me, it's like it's 10,000 years ago, and like, you know, we're on the coast of the Mediterranean, and you're like, I built a boat. I was gonna build a boat, you know, like, you know, like, well, you've got the boat thing done. Have fun exploring the world. I'll just sit here on the beach. Like, no, like, it's just the world that we're entering into is so much bigger, so much deep. It's gonna be so much more vaster that it's like, it's competition, but it's like more like it's like space. Oh, you have a spaceship. I guess you own space now. I'm like, no, like, it's so much bigger than we can conceive of, that we're gonna need a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Like as said, a lot of potential, a lot of up to grabs. The more, the merrier, and I'm just loving it.
Also, can GPT-3 understand basic logic? Like, has it come up with mathematical proofs, for example? Do you know?
It can do simple sort of stuff, and that's another area of people trying to explore, like, you know, how much it's able to follow through and do stuff. And I think part of that is that you're going to run into limitations with a language model that is primarily a language model, and more trying to understand the nuance of what's being said than perhaps the precision of what's being said. But it has been surprising when you look at, like, if you do a search for GPT-3 and logic, you'll see some people examples like really good and then really big drop off. You know, it's like, you know, a kid who shows up in honors class and you find out that, like, you know, they never, you know, honors English and they never went to math class. Like, explain to me addition again.
I mean, again, if GPT-3 manages to be better at maths than me, then again, this is like just a big hit to me. But we'll just have to wait and see. I'm a bit relieved there's a big drop off. I mean, it's kind of explainable, kind of understandable. But there's a lot to explore again, and yeah.
It's also,
and you can use it as an interface too. You can get it to explain stuff to you too, though. Like, you can say, explain how this math thing works, explain to me a simpler way how this works, etc. That's kind of the cool part, is that, you know.
It's the weird thing that at some things that, it should be easy to do, it'll probably be like super bad at, and then other things that seem super complicated, mathematical something, just happens to know for some reason. It's quite funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the English major who can't change the oil in his car.
That's a really good example.
That's true. Do you know if there's a GPT-4 already in the works?
We're always pushing and developing, you know, trying to figure out what, you know, the next things are. So
maybe.
I
definitely hope so, and I'm definitely excited what it can do.
I want to go straight to, like, you know, GPT infinity. That's my goal. Like, you know, I bring that up meetings, like, let's skip any other GPT. Let's just go all the way.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, again, I'm excited to see the potential GPT infinity. I think this is the point where it's going to be a bit, okay, now I'm a bit scared. But we're going to have to wait and see.
We're already running on it, just so you know.
Yeah, that kind of freaks me more. Like, this is even worse than the horror story right now.
Oh no, it's getting worse and worse. No, super cool. And somebody asked, because we just had it about fine-tuning, that as he understood, fine-tuning isn't something planned for the nearest future, and what the reason behind this is.
We're a small team. You know, OpenAI, despite, like, the impact you might see from GPT-3, whatever, is we're a pretty small company, and we kind of like it that way because it allows us to have our ability to talk across the company to a lot of other people is amazing. So we have to sort of pick things, you know, figure out what we can implement at each time and sort of focus on that. So, you know, if it's often, it's not like, we're like, oh, you guys should do this. It's like, we'd love to do this, but there's our core mission is developing these complex, you know, these sophisticated models and doing this. The API is part of that to help this part of it, but like a big part of, like, OpenAI is kind of like an iceberg, where, like, the research part of it's such a bigger part of what's going on there. So when it comes to other aspects like that, it's just figuring out how much demand is there really for it, and what people can we throw at that problem.
No, that's really good to know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, Andrew, but my impression was always it's like, for me, OpenAI was always like an open source enabler for the AI world. I don't know how you see it, but that's like the way I felt it all the time. It's like just like seeing what there's demand, what people are needing, and just like kind of putting in this like research and this like tip of the iceberg, as you like very beautifully mentioned, and just like opening the doors for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is that the core goal is the development of beneficial AI that benefits everybody, and figuring out the what may have been, we thought, the pathway to do that 5 years ago, and how you implement that changes as the world changes and our understandings change. And and that means that sometimes we have to do things to be like, why are you doing this? And it's like, well, because we thought through this and it makes more sense to what we're trying to do. Our goal is, I can promise you, the goal is very clearly beneficial AI for everybody, and that's like, how do you figure that out, and how do we use our resources to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, being versatile is definitely a very important like aspect which you have even in the tech world. Actually, especially in the tech world, it's kind of changing really quite fast.
Yeah, especially with GPT-3. Also, somebody asked, kind of related to this, since GPT-3 is not open source yet, is there any way for anyone to contribute on it?
Yeah, I think that finding ways to use it, prompt design, things like this, like creating really helpful. We've got a really good community, and if you, when you become a developer for it, we have, a community of people who are creating stuff for it, figuring out problems that people are trying to solve. Before I worked at OpenAI, I actually had a blog, and I talked about things I've discovered you could do with GPT-3, and I, showed different use cases and stuff, and I wrote a lot about this and shared this. Les did a bunch of other people and say, hey, here's things you can do with it. I did tutorial videos before working at OpenAI about, hey, here's how to do this and that. It's actually one of the reasons they brought me on board, was because I was very enthusiastic about trying to share what I've learned. Really play with things and think about the challenges, like in the and challenges, the challenge that we face with a model like this are going to be the same with other models. And bias issues are very big. That's a thing you have to think about whenever you deal with language and things like this. What are solutions? What are ways to solve these problems? What are ways to build tools and help people handle this? And I think they could, we want to make AI beneficial for everybody, and you want to make it, my personal mission is to give everybody access to this. And the way that we make these things possible is that a lot of smart people solving problems. It's very easy to start a blog and a podcast and go, well, this is broken and this is broken. Yes.
Yeah.
But getting in there and finding solutions is how we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, solution-oriented versus problem-oriented is like definitely a very established standoff, and I'm pretty sure we are all on the same side of being a bit solution-oriented. And like, again, this like beneficial AI, to create beneficial AI is an amazing mission, but also this like low access barrier to AI is also like one of the things we're really trying to achieve here at TUM.ai.
And especially with this Makeathon as well, we have loads of problems that are stated by companies, but also people can come up with themselves that they can then solve. I think it'd be super cool to see.
And I would say, another way to contribute too is, if you have connection with a local school, think about, talking to high school students, talking to people about AI, talking to people with that. And one of the things that think about how influenced you were by somebody who was kind of interested or need when you were a young person that may have helped shape where you went in the future. And I think really to help AI along, we want to bring in as many different voices as we can. And sometimes that means talking to people when they're younger, talking to kids and students and saying, hey, here's cool stuff, here's ways to think about it. And that's something I used to work, I was involved in education for years in critical thinking in classrooms, and I saw the impact you could have of just putting ideas into people's heads early on.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, education has actually also like really emphasized an important area, but like kind of inspiring people, because just think of it, if you kind of get into the kid's head and put the AI inside of it, it kind of takes the place of something else, which hopefully is not that good. So it's like, just think of it, if you kind of get the people excited about AI, and not just any AI, just everything that's good, you kind of keep them from doing the wrong things. And I think people, like children, they're just sometimes, they're not stimulated enough. And I think AI is definitely a really good stimulator.
I think they probably also don't have that much influence by other people yet to have like to say similar opinions to everybody else. They still kind of have a fresh mind and maybe have even more creative ideas, is what you see with art and stuff as well. Like kids are usually more creative, so maybe with this sort of thing, it will also be cool to see what simple things they come up with that might actually work, like what we just talked about earlier.
Yeah, definitely. It's very exciting.
Yeah, that's true. Is there a use case that you tried but failed to come up with a prompt that delivered the result you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, I played with, trying to get it to do kind of more logical stuff. As a writer, the first thing I wanted to do is try to get it to do really long form, or even within like the 2,000 token limit, to try to get it to kind of do there. And I could find kind of approaches to do that by using kind of built-in summarization methods and things like that to do that. But when you realize that like that window of like token size, it kind of limits its comprehension of stuff. So, some things like that, trying to get it to perform certain tasks reliably. You get excited about it. It's like you get a dog that's pretty smart, and then you're like, hey, here are my keys to my car. Go get me a pizza. And it's just like, all right. You're like,
it's the wrong thing to ask.
Oh man,
yeah. It'll try. I mean, it'll try.
It'll look at you very confused, like, what do you want?
Hey, at least it's gonna try. I mean, that's a wonderful.
Like it really
example.
wants to do it, but it's just like.
I mean, I can like bark at like the postman, like bite him, but that's like just way a bit over my head.
Help you eat the pizza.
Yeah,
it's a good start. Also, is it possible to annotate or highlight text with GPT-3? This normally would be awesome coupled with classification.
Well, I mean, I built for fun, and as speaking to other people involved in tech, our idea of fun is not like what anybody else would recognize as fun. I built like a grammar checker using GPT-3, and then what I did is I just used some JavaScript to say like, mark these words, go in there and highlight that, and GPT by itself won't, but you could use it plus something else, or say find the things in here, like which sentence matches this or whatever. So, you can use it to extract stuff and do that in some capacity like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one other use case that I'm pretty sure every college student is going to be so helpful. I can't imagine how much time I actually put into annotating things, and it's just like donkey work. It doesn't really get you anywhere.
Silence.
This is not the place to discuss my educational problems. This is like, we're going to need another Q&A for that one.
Can ask questions later. What is the best way to summarize long paragraphs, as a character limit can be quite tight?
So, in writing, I remember asking when I was in high school, asking my English teacher, what made for a paragraph? When is a paragraph and when is it not, right? So I'm like, and I never got a full answer. And then as a writer, I struggle with this. And I think about like, well, it's kind of a complete thought. It's a complete expression, right? Which is still kind of hand-wavy. But if you want to build a method to summarize larger text, I would say start at the paragraph level. Go summarize this paragraph, and work at the paragraph. You could use a random word thing, but if you focus on the paragraph level, if it's really short paragraphs, then maybe you take every 3 paragraphs or something, but then you get into sort of that area. And you could summarize your summary too, so you can do that. So you might say summarize at the paragraph level, or it really depends upon the kind of text too, because like, I, as a writer, like I write these short paragraphs, like, almost fit one of my paragraphs into a prompt. J.K. Rowling writes really, really long chapters. And so, I mean, you could fit one of my chapters in a prompt, rather. And her chapters are really long because they're about, Harry, this semester of school or whatever. So you have to sort of have an idea of maybe the text and then what level you can break it down. How granular can you make it?
Yeah, and that's also would have been an amazing application. Being a Potterhead myself, that J.K. Rowling reference did hit me quite hard.
So one of the things I did early on, which was fun, was I made a conversation between Neil Gaiman, J.K. Rowling, and like Stephen King, and I asked them a question. And you can do this in your playground. You can create people that it knows, real or fictionary, new term for you all. You're German, right? Yeah, no, it's an English word, really. So you could. You could create a conversation and you can watch them discuss stuff, and it was amazing because I'd watch Neil Gaiman say stuff like, I'm sure he had to have said this somewhere. No, but it had just read enough Neil Gaiman that it knew how to quote him or make a thing that sounded like him. So that's so cool. So much fun.
Like I know what's keeping up to me tonight that night. Just like a play like with my favorite characters, like get them together. Like
so
just imagine every single like not fictional fight that you've imagined that the guys actually make into a movie. GPT-3, go to the playground, try it out. You're gonna have it.
Maybe, Andrew, one question to finish up. Where can I apply for your job? Is a question somebody asked.
I mean, seriously, go to OpenAI, take a look at we have like jobs or whatever. You can go there, and we're always looking for really talented people, or in my case, eager.
Man with many talents.
My advice is that, and this is the same to anybody. Nobody asked for my advice. I understand that, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. is make things. I have no formal background in artificial intelligence. I have no formal background in that. I built a bunch of things and I played with stuff, and I got asked to work with OpenAI because they saw the things I made. I was building all kinds of applications. I was pushing the boundaries, and I was showing stuff and things that were helpful to them to go, oh wow, this is really cool. This is neat, And so my advice to people, even if you have advanced degrees, etc., make things because we're a small company, and the talent I get to work with the people that are incredible, and I meet people who are amazing research scientists who can then go in and talk to a customer and understand how to make something better. I talk to somebody who's writing great research papers and coming up with practical solutions, then making stuff, and it is awesome to be around people like that. So making things in any whatever you want to do in life, make things. So go out there, play, and don't be afraid to make things that don't work. Like, don't be afraid that if it doesn't work, like, just try it, and then understanding why it doesn't work is great.
Yeah, I mean, making things.
Such good motivation for this Makeathon as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we just wanted to get like people from different domains to come. Hey, and just guys, here's a good tool. Just start making things. And that's the way.
Summarizes it pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
A year ago, right before I got asked to be part of working with OpenAI on the API, I mean, I'm writing books. I'm doing AI stuff on the side, but to the world, I'm a novelist, magician, idiot who swims with sharks, and then I get involved in this. Here I am a year later, at a hack. Well, let me tell you about GPT-3 and OpenAI. Okay. It's kind of absurd, but that's the way the world works.
Cool.
And that should be encouraging to everybody, because I would imagine that the average of everybody here is way smarter than me.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, yeah, I'm also a guy who's like interested in many different things, but I don't have 50 books, so.
But that's the cool thing. Like, people with all kinds of different smartness can come together and come with different ideas. So that's the cool thing about this. Not just AI smart or tech smart. Yeah. Oh wow. Definitely.
Andrew Mayne, a pleasure and a privilege. It's been amazing to see you present today. It was amazing to see you answer all these questions. There have been a lot, and you've answered all of them. So for that.
Also, just for everybody else, Andrew will also be there on the Makeathon weekend to answer some further questions if you have some more there. So make sure to find him then. He was kindly offering his time to answer also the questions, so that's really cool. Yeah. So don't worry.
Thank you.
I keep weird hours, so it might take a while. But yes.
But he'll be there.
Thank you for doing that for us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your passion for AI. And with that, I'd just also like to end this place with saying, guys, stay excited, stay psyched. And it's an amazing time to have AI
And just a quick info for all participants, the workshop tomorrow, the business ideation workshop, will be at 7 p.m. And for everybody that's watching that's not a Makeathon participant, we'll continue on Wednesday with the Flutter workshop and the talk in AI for Good.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that as well. From Ekram, from Microsoft. It's going to be a long week. We've started out with a really good couple of talks, and I'm excited to see
very insightful week though.
Up our sleeve. Yeah, so guys, stay excited, stay psyched.
And thanks again, Andrew. We'll see you around.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.